My mother spent her life convincing me we had nothing. So when her attorney placed a deed in my hands, a boarded-up cottage buried deep in the woods, I figured someone had made a mistake. But when I tore away the rotting planks, it wasn't dust waiting behind them. It was her terrifying $1 million secret. Grief weighs on you like wet concrete. But poverty is what actually keeps your eyes open at 3 in the morning. My mother, Evelyn Brody, died on a rainy Tuesday in October. For my entire life, it had been just the two of us. A cramped, drafty apartment in South Boston. She pulled double shifts at a diner, came home with hands that reeked of burnt coffee and industrial dish soap. We bought our clothes from thrift stores, stretched every meal with rice and beans. Held our breath each time the radiator clanked, because calling a repairman was out of the question. "We're rich in spirit, Samantha," she'd say, managing a worn-out smile over a bowl of canned soup. "That's the only wealth that matters." So, when a letter arrived from the law offices of Blake Pendleton, a polished firm in downtown Boston, requesting my presence for the reading of her will, I was certain they had the wrong person. My mother didn't have an estate. She had a drawer of threadbare sweaters and roughly $400 in a checking account. Blake Pendleton was a tall, commanding man. Silver hair, framed degrees lining mahogany walls, a suit that probably cost more than my car. He didn't look like someone who handled the affairs of diner waitresses. He sat across from me, pressed his fingertips together, and slid a thick manila folder across the gleaming desk. "Your mother was an exceptionally private woman, Samantha, Mr. Pendleton said, his voice low and deliberate. "She left strict instructions. This was to be delivered to you, and only you, upon her death." I opened the folder. Inside lay a heavy, yellowed piece of parchment. A deed. "Property?" My voice cracked on the word. "My mother didn't own property. We rented every place we ever lived. She couldn't even afford a car that started in winter." "She owned this," Pendleton said quietly, pressing a manicured fingernail against the document. "A property known as Briarwood Cottage. 10 acres of private woodland in the Berkshires. Fully paid off. Taxes maintained through an anonymous trust for the past 28 years. 28 years. My head reeled. That was right before I was born. How could a woman who wept over a $50 spike in our heating bill own a 10-acre estate in one of the most expensive corners of Massachusetts? Before I could press for answers, the heavy oak door swung wide. In walked my Uncle Richard. Richard Brody was my mother's older brother. Real estate developer, billionaire, drove a pristine German sports car. He and my mother had been estranged for decades. No visits, no holiday calls. He didn't even bother attending her funeral. Yet here he stood, out of breath, face flushed beneath his expensive tan. "Blake," Richard snapped, not even glancing my direction. "Tell me you haven't executed the transfer yet." "The estate belongs to Samantha, Richard, per Evelyn's explicit wishes," the lawyer answered. His tone could have frosted glass. Richard finally turned to me. His expression rearranged itself into something meant to resemble sympathy. Practiced. Hollow. "Sam, sweetheart, I'm so sorry for your loss. I was out of the country, otherwise I would have been at the service." He dragged a leather chair closer, leaning in too far. "Listen to me carefully. Your mother was not in her right mind. That property, Briarwood, it's a toxic disaster. A condemned shack on a plot riddled with black mold and structural rot. The county has been threatening seizure for years over safety violations." I stared at him. "You knew about this place?" "Of course I knew," he exhaled, dragging a hand across his face in a performance of exhaustion. "I've been trying to manage the liability on her behalf. She was a hoarder, Sam. The whole thing is a teardown. If you accept ownership, the county will bury you. Tens of thousands in demolition fees, environmental cleanup. You're a young woman. You don't have that kind of money." He reached into his tailored jacket, pulled out a checkbook. "I want to protect you. It's what Evelyn would have wanted," Richard went on, his voice glazed with manufactured warmth. "Sign the deed over to my LLC today. I'll handle the legal weight, manage the demolition, and cut you a check today for $10,000. Covers the funeral, gives you breathing room." For one fraction of a heartbeat, I nearly took it. $10,000 was a small empire in my world. Credit cards wiped clean, rent paid for months. But my gaze drifted down to the deed. Then it shifted to Richard. His eyes had gone wide, locked on that paper like it might bite him. A single bead of sweat crawled down his temple, in a room cold enough to hang meat. He was desperate. My mother had clawed through her entire life, guarding this secret. She never sold it when selling would have pulled us out of poverty. She never let Richard near it. There was a reason. "No," I said. I slid the folder toward my side of the table and stood. Richard's manufactured warmth evaporated on contact. His eyes went dark. Whatever had been posing as friendliness peeled away, revealing something cold, venomous. "You're making a massive mistake, Samantha. You have no idea what you're dealing with. That place is boarded up for a reason. Don't go out there." "I guess I'll find out," I said, snatching my coat off the chair. Walking out of that office, the skin on the back of my neck went electric. The warning embedded in his voice wasn't about money lost or legal headaches. It carried the weight of a threat. The drive to the Berkshires swallowed 4 hours of my life. Highway gave way to narrow roads. Narrow roads gave way to twisting dirt paths, choked by ancient pines, so dense they swallowed the sky. My phone's GPS died a full hour before I spotted them. Rusted iron gates strangled behind walls of ivy and thorny bramble. A faded sign dangled from a single chain, swaying like a hanged man. Briarwood. I pulled my rusted Honda onto the shoulder, killed the engine. From the trunk, I grabbed a heavy iron crowbar and a high-powered flashlight. Then, I forced my way through the pedestrian side gate. The walk up that driveway buried me in silence. Total, suffocating silence, the kind that presses against your eardrums. Nothing but dead leaves cracking beneath my boots. When the tree line finally broke, the cottage revealed itself. My breath locked in my chest. Uncle Richard had called it a shack. He lied. A sprawling 3-story Victorian built from stone rose before me. Wraparound porch, intricate woodwork, weathered, yes, but unmistakably crafted with care. What made my stomach plummet was the way it had been sealed. Every window on the first and second floors buried behind thick, heavy-duty plywood. Massive, industrial-grade iron bolts driven through each board. The front door, solid oak, wrapped in chains and secured with 3 separate padlocks, all scabbed with rust. This was not a property boarded up against teenagers or drifters. This was a fortress. Someone had invested serious effort ensuring whatever lived inside that house stayed inside. Or, and this thought landed harder, that no one from the outside could ever reach it. Richard's voice threaded through my skull. "That place is boarded up for a reason." My heart slammed against my ribs. But the anger, decades of watching my mother suffer, scrape, hide, shoved me forward. I circled around to the back. A side door, probably leading to a kitchen or cellar. The plywood covering its glass pane had taken decades of water damage. Soft at the bottom corner. Spongy. I wedged the crowbar's flat end into the rotted gap, then threw every pound I had against the steel. The wood groaned, splintered, snapped with a crack loud enough to scatter birds from the canopy. 20 minutes of breathless, sweat-soaked labor, prying wood, shattering glass, reaching through to unlock the door from inside. I crossed the threshold, flashlight on. I braced for the stench, black mold, rot, the toxic ruin my uncle had promised. Instead, the air hit, dry, clean, carrying the faint, unmistakable scent of cedar, dried lavender, and old paper. I swept the beam across the room. Every molecule of oxygen left my lungs. I was standing in a massive gourmet kitchen. Real marble countertops, custom copper pots still hanging from an iron rack above a 6-burner industrial stove. Everything sealed beneath a thick, grey skin of dust. Untouched for close to 3 decades. I pushed through the swinging doors into the main living room. Afternoon light bled through the cracks in the plywood, slicing the darkness into sharp, golden stripes. Furniture hid beneath white canvas sheets, motionless shapes like ghosts frozen mid-step. I gripped the nearest sheet and pulled. A plush, velvet sofa, immaculate beneath its shroud. Another sheet torn free. A grand piano. I was drifting through a museum of obscene wealth. My mother, the same woman who held my winter coats together with strips of duct tape, owned all of it. Tears burned at the corners of my eyes. Awe and betrayal tangled together into something I couldn't name. Why? Why did we scrape by like we had nothing, while she kept a mansion buried in the trees? I moved down a long corridor flanked by shut doors. At the far end stood a pair of heavy double doors, sealed tight. The brass keyhole was oversized, antique. No key in my pocket, but the wood around the lock had gone brittle with age. I jammed the crowbar into the strike plate and threw my weight behind it. The frames splintered hard, both doors crashing inward. My flashlight swept across a vast study. Bookshelves climbed floor to ceiling on 3 walls, packed with leather-bound volumes. But the desk at the room's center, that's what pulled me forward. I crossed to the massive mahogany surface. Dead center, on the leather blotter, sat a silver-framed photograph buried under a skin of dust. I dragged my thumb across the glass. My mother stared back at me, early 20s, luminous, wrapped in a designer silk dress, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists. She was smiling, leaning into a man wearing a tuxedo, Uncle Richard. The two of them looked like they belonged on a magazine cover. But it wasn't them that stopped my heart. It was what my mother held. A baby, swaddled in a pink blanket, cradled against her chest. Along the bottom edge, stamped in elegant gold ink, Evelyn, Richard, and baby Claire. August 1996. I was born in 98. My name is Samantha. I never had a sister. My mother never once spoke of another child. My hands trembled as I set the frame down. Next to it lay a thick, leather-bound ledger. I cracked it open. Not a diary, a precise accounting log, millions of dollars threaded through offshore shell companies. And there on the inside cover, scrawled in my mother's unmistakable hand, was something that turned my blood to ice. If you are reading this, I am dead. Do not trust Richard. Do not trust the police. The money in the walls belongs to the families we ruined, and the blood on my hands can never wash clean. Hide. A violent crash from the front of the house split the silence wide open. Someone was tearing through the chains on the front door. I wasn't alone anymore. The shriek of iron and crack of wood rolled through the hollow corridors, thrumming up through the floorboards under my feet. Someone had taken a sledgehammer to the entrance. Heavy, purposeful boots ground over the wreckage. Low male voices followed. Clipped. Professional. Panic hit my chest like a blade of cold steel. Uncle Richard's warning hadn't been some legal posture. It had been a stalling tactic, keeping me away until his people arrived. "Check the perimeter," a deep voice commanded.
Richard said she might have come up the dirt road.
"If she's inside, she doesn't leave. We need that ledger." My eyes dropped to the heavy book clutched in my hands. The ledger, my mother's confession. I stuffed it into my canvas tote alongside the framed photograph of the mystery baby. I had to disappear. My flashlight whipped across the study in frantic arcs. The room's single window was sealed behind the same industrial plywood as every other opening. No way out. The footsteps were closer now, advancing down the hallway toward the study's ruined double doors. Desperation sharpens your eyes. You notice what you'd normally walk right past. As I pressed myself against the towering bookshelf, my elbow caught a decorative wood panel wedged between two columns of encyclopedias. The sound it made wasn't solid. It rang hollow. I threw my weight into it. The panel groaned on rusted hinges. An agonizing screech I begged the intruder's boots were loud enough to swallow, and swung inward. A hidden servant's passage. I didn't hesitate. I slid into the narrow, lightless gap and dragged the panel closed behind me. The latch caught with a soft click. Seconds later, the study doors were kicked the rest of the way open. I flattened my spine against rough, dust-caked brick inside the corridor. Both hands sealed over my mouth, smothering every ragged breath. Through a hairline crack in the panel, I watched two men enter the study. Not police. Dark tactical gear. Faces carved from stone, movements efficient and rehearsed. One of them, broad-shouldered, a jagged scar cutting across his jaw, walked straight to the mahogany desk. "Boss, the desk is empty," the scarred man said, pressing an earpiece deeper into his ear. He went quiet, listening. "Yeah, I know, but the ledger isn't here, and there's fresh dirt on the rug. She beat us to it." Silence stretched. Then his face went dark. "Understood. We'll find her. She won't make it back to Boston." My blood turned to ice. My uncle had ordered a hit on me. Over a book. Over a cottage I didn't even know existed 24 hours ago. "Tear the walls apart if you have to," the second man growled, sweeping a flashlight across the room. Richard said Evelyn hid over $12 million in physical assets somewhere in this house before she dropped off the grid. Find the cash. Find the girl. $12 million. The money in the walls. My head was spinning. The woman who had sobbed in my arms because she couldn't cover a $300 dental bill, she had $12 million stashed inside a boarded-up mansion. I couldn't stay here. I turned from the crack in the wall and clicked my flashlight to its lowest setting. The narrow passage fed into a steep descent, wooden stairs plunging downward. I crept along them, wincing at every groan of the timber, my fingers dragging through cobwebs on the brick walls. The stairs emptied me into the basement. It was enormous. reeking of damp earth and motor oil. Along the far wall, something caught my eye. The house's foundation was built from large, irregular field stones, but one section, roughly 10 feet wide, was constructed of perfectly uniform concrete cinder blocks. The mortar between them was a different shade, newer than everything else in the cellar, the money in the walls. But there was no time to investigate. Boots thundered down the main staircase above me. They were coming. I spotted an old coal chute in the corner, its rusted iron hatch cracked open. I scrambled up the mound of ancient coal dust, shoved my tote bag through the gap, and forced my shoulders into the tight opening. Metal scraped against my ribs, tore through my jacket, but adrenaline swallowed the pain whole. I tumbled onto the damp forest floor just as the basement lights stuttered to life inside. I didn't look back. I ran blind through dense briar patches, thorns shredding my jeans, until I burst through the tree line and hit gravel. My rusted Honda sat where I'd left it. I threw myself behind the wheel, turned the engine over, and kept my headlights completely dark until I was 5 miles down the winding mountain road, Briarwood Cottage disappearing behind me. I didn't stop driving until I reached a dingy, neon-lit motel on the outskirts of Springfield, the kind of place that asks no questions, takes only cash. I paid for a room under a fake name, locked the flimsy door behind me, and shoved a heavy oak dresser against the frame. My hands were trembling so violently I could barely grip the zipper on my tote. I dumped everything onto the worn floral bedspread, the ledger, the photograph. I lowered myself to the edge of the mattress and cracked open the heavy leather book. I needed to understand why I was being hunted. I needed to know who my mother really was. The first few dozen pages, dense accounting charts, dates running from 1991 to 1996. They detailed an entity called the Brody Investment Group, and as I read the margin notes, the horrifying truth assembled itself piece by piece. My mother Evelyn and my uncle Richard hadn't been estranged back then. They were partners, and they were running a massive, ruthless Ponzi scheme. They had targeted working-class families, pensioners, factory workers, teachers, promising impossible returns while siphoning life savings into offshore accounts. Nearly $40 million stolen. But as I turned the pages, the clinical accounting gave way to something else entirely. Frantic, handwritten journal entries. The tone lurched from cold calculation to raw terror. The 14th of October, 1996. The feds are circling. Richard is arrogant. He thinks his lawyers can bury the subpoenas. He doesn't care that the SEC is looking into the Cayman accounts. But worse than that, Claire's treatments are failing. Dr. Aris says the leukemia is too aggressive. There is nothing more to do. I begged Richard to unlock the Swiss accounts to fund the experimental trials in Europe. He refused. He said the money is tied up, that she's a lost cause. He chose the money over our daughter. I stared at the name. Our daughter. Claire wasn't just my mother's child, she was Richard's daughter. Evelyn and Richard weren't siblings, they were husband and wife. The man I'd known my whole life as my uncle, he was actually my mother's husband, her partner in every crime. They shared a last name because they'd stood at an altar together. My stomach turned inside out. I forced my eyes back to the page. The 3rd of January, 1997. Claire is gone. She died in my arms at 3 a.m. Richard never showed up at the hospital. He was too busy shredding documents. I hate him. I hate what we've become. The money we stole is cursed.
I've taken the physical assets.
12 million in bearer bonds, gold and cash, and sealed them inside the basement walls of Briarwood. Richard will never find them. Let it all rot. I'm changing my identity. I'm disappearing into the slums of Boston. It's the punishment I deserve. Suddenly, everything locked into place. The suffocating poverty we endured. The diner shifts. The absolute refusal to touch a bank account or swipe a credit card. My mother had been hiding from the FBI. She'd been hiding from Richard. She chose intentional destitution, a self-imposed sentence for the family she'd wrecked and the daughter she'd buried. But my heart still hammered against my ribs in a wild, desperate rhythm. Because none of this explained me. If Claire died in 1997 and Evelyn vanished into hiding, who was I? That photo of Claire, taken 2 full years before I was born. I turned to the very last page of the ledger. The paper was warped, stiff with dried tears. Ink bled and smudged across the words. The date read, the 12th of April, 1998. My exact birthday. I couldn't live with the silence. The apartment was so cold, so empty without a child. Grief was devouring me alive. I did something unforgivable today. I went to the maternity ward at Boston General. Told myself I only wanted to look at the babies, just to feel close to Claire. But then I saw her in the nursery. The nurse turned away. The baby had Claire's nose, her exact eyes. I didn't think. I picked her up, slipped her into my coat, and walked out the fire exit. They think I'm just another tired, poor mother. God forgive me for the pain I've caused her real parents. I named her Samantha. The book dropped from my fingers, hit the cheap carpet with a flat, dead sound. I couldn't pull air into my lungs. The motel room shrank around me, walls pressing in, oxygen thinning to nothing. I wasn't Evelyn Brody's daughter. I wasn't Samantha Brody. My entire life, the poverty, the hiding, the memories of a hard-working, loving mother. All of it was a meticulously constructed, psychotic lie. The woman who brushed my hair, who kissed my scraped knees, who told me we were rich in spirit. She was a fraudster who'd stolen my life to replace the dead child she'd had with a sociopath. My hands shaking, I reached into the back pocket of the ledger. A small, yellowed newspaper clipping fluttered loose. Frantic search for abducted infant. Police are searching for baby Sarah Gallagher, abducted from the Boston General Maternity Ward yesterday afternoon. Parents Thomas and Mary Gallagher are offering a reward. Sarah Gallagher. That was my real name. I had real parents somewhere out there. Parents who'd spent the last 26 years trapped inside a nightmare, wondering what happened to their baby girl. Before I could even begin to process the magnitude of that betrayal, my cell phone buzzed violently against the nightstand. The caller ID showed a Boston area code. I figured it was Blake Pendleton, calling to find out why I'd bolted from his office. Numb, I swiped the screen and pressed the phone to my ear. Hello? Did you enjoy the reading material? A voice purred through the speaker. Not the lawyer, Richard. You, I choked, backing flat against the wall. How did you get this number? I'm a very resourceful man. His voice dripped with terrifying, measured authority. I also know you're in room 12 of the Starlight Motel on Route 20. Did you really think I wouldn't slip a GPS tracker into your coat pocket when I hugged you in Blake's office? A pause. Cold. Deliberate. You've got something that belongs to me, Sarah, and I'm currently sitting in the parking lot. I rushed to the window, pulled the heavy curtain back just a fraction. Parked directly beneath the flickering neon motel sign, a sleek black SUV. The driver's side window slid down. The man with the scarred jaw from the cottage stared straight at my window. "Bring the ledger outside," Richard's voice echoed in my ear, "or we come in and take it." The digital clock on the nightstand pulsed 11:42 p.m. in angry, red digits. Outside, car doors slamming, heavy boots hammering the exterior concrete walkway. My thoughts scattered and reassembled at the speed of raw adrenaline. No chance of outrunning them. No chance of overpowering two grown men. But poverty in South Boston drills one lesson into your bones before anything else. When your fists can't win the fight, you torch the ground beneath your enemy's feet. I snatched my phone, opened the camera, and started shooting high-resolution photos of the ledger with shaking hands. The confession, the offshore account numbers, the dates, and last, that gutting journal entry describing my abduction. Thump. The motel door shuddered in its frame. The heavy oak dresser I jammed against it shrieked 2 inches across the thin carpet. "Sarah," Richard's voice cut through from the other side. No pretense of politeness left. "Open this door right now. If Griggs has to break it down, I won't be able to stop him from hurting you." I didn't look up. My fingers tore across the cracked screen. 12 photos attached to a single email. In the recipient field, Blake Pendleton's address. The only attorney tangled in this web. I CC'd the generic tip line for the Boston FBI field office, found it in a desperate 2-second search. Subject line: Evelyn Brody, Richard Brody, Ponzi scheme confession, and kidnapping evidence. Smash. The door frame cracked open like a rib. The dresser buckled inward under Griggs's massive shoulder. Seconds. That's all I had. I hit send. A quiet swoosh from the phone's speaker. The data was airborne, beyond anyone's reach now. I dialed 911 immediately, slid the phone beneath the motel bed, and seized the only weapon available, a heavy ceramic lamp from the nightstand. Ripped the cord from the wall, pressed my back into the corner of the room, the ledger crushed against my chest with my free arm. One final, ear-splitting crash, the door surrendered. The dresser toppled forward, dragging the floral curtains to the floor. Griggs entered first, flicking wood splinters off his tactical jacket. Richard followed behind, stepping over the wreckage with the easy grace of a man walking into a 5-star restaurant. Cashmere overcoat, silver hair sculpted in place. He looked at me, cornered, clutching a lamp, and his mouth bent into something cold.
Reptilian.
"You always were a scrappy little thing," Richard breathed, shaking his head slowly. "Evelyn raised a fighter. I'll give her that. Hand over the book, Sarah. It's over." "My name is Samantha." My voice shook but carried, loud enough for the phone beneath the bed to record every syllable. "And I know everything. I know about the Brody Investment Group. I know you stole $40 million from innocent people, and I know you let your own daughter, Claire, die because you refused to touch your offshore accounts to save her." Richard's smile died. For one raw second, genuine murderous fury blazed behind his eyes. Claire was a lost cause. Evelyn was a sentimental fool who couldn't see the bigger picture. Business requires sacrifice. "So you sacrificed your wife too?" I pressed. "Let her run and hide in the slums?" Richard let out a dark, quiet laugh. Stepped closer. "Let her? Oh, sweetheart, you don't understand how any of this works. I encouraged her to run. When the SEC started circling, I needed a scapegoat. Evelyn vanished, and all the missing funds conveniently vanished with her. But she had a conscience. I knew that one day she might crack, go to the feds. He pointed a manicured finger directly at me. That's where you came in. Do you know why I never sent the police after her to recover my 12 million? Because the day she stole you from Boston General Hospital, she handed me the ultimate insurance policy. The air locked in my throat. I knew exactly where she was for the last 26 years, Richard said, voice saturated with arrogance. Kept tabs on both of you. As long as she had a kidnapped child in her custody, she could never go to the authorities about the fraud. The moment she tried, I would have tipped off the police anonymously. Evelyn Brody, child abductor, federal prison. And she would have lost you. You weren't just her daughter, Sarah. You were her muzzle. Tears streaked down my face. My mother, the woman who'd rocked me to sleep, who had ground her hands raw, keeping food on our table. She loved me. But that love was a cage constructed around a monstrous crime, and I was nothing more than a piece on a billionaire's board. Give me the ledger, Richard demanded, his hand outstretched. Griggs found the 12 million in the basement wall at Briarwood an hour ago. That book is the last loose end. Once it's ash, nothing connects me to the fraud. I finally retire in peace. No, I said. My fingers tightened around the spine of the book. Griggs drew a suppressed handgun from inside his jacket.
Enough talking, boss.
I sent it, I screamed, locking my eyes directly onto Richard's. The confession, the account numbers, the kidnapping. I photographed every single page. I emailed it all to Blake Pendleton and the FBI 2 minutes ago. Richard went rigid. The color bled out of his expensive tan like water draining from a sink. You're lying, he whispered. Check your phone, I fired back. Call Pendleton. Ask him what just landed in his inbox. Richard clawed into his coat pocket, fumbling out his smartphone. He punched in a number. His hand trembled. He pressed the phone to his ear. The silence in that room was thick enough to choke on. Blake, Richard barked. Did you just receive an email from... He stopped. He swallowed hard. I see. Delete it. Blake, do not open... Blake. He lowered the phone from his ear, his face twisted into something beyond panic. Pendleton had hung up on him. And faintly, threading through the night air from somewhere in the distance, the wail of police sirens. The 911 dispatcher had heard everything. She burned us, Griggs snarled, already stepping backward toward the shattered door. I'm not doing federal time for you, Richard. I'm out. Griggs spun and bolted through the doorway. Swallowed by the darkness of the parking lot, gone. Richard stood there staring at me, chest heaving. The polished, untouchable billionaire had evaporated. What remained was a cornered animal, desperate, rabid, stripped of every mask. He looked at the ledger in my hands, then at the growing scream of the sirens. He lunged. Both hands closed around my throat. His full weight drove me backward. We hit the floor hard, the ceramic lamp exploding into shards beside us. His grip was shockingly strong, thumbs grinding into my windpipe. Black spots bloomed at the edges of my vision. I will kill you, he hissed, spit flying from his mouth. Just like I should have killed Evelyn. My lungs were on fire. My hands scraped blindly against the carpet. My fingers grazed something jagged, heavy, a thick shard of the shattered lamp. With every last grain of strength left in my body, I seized it and drove it upward, raking the edge across Richard's forearm. He shrieked. His hands flew open. I threw myself backward, gulping air in ragged, burning gasps, one hand clutching my bruised throat. Red and blue light poured through the broken motel window, painting wild, violent shadows across every wall.